Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarian. Tēnā koutou nā manuhiri, no mai, haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to this space made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for 119 years. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our congregation, in our local community, and in our world community. We hope you will find the experience enriching, and just so you know, the service does not really end until after you've shared a cuppa with us at morning tea. It's our sacrament of hospitality. Please join us. It won't be complete without you. There's a Unitarian theologian that you've probably never heard of, but in his day, he was quite famous. His name is James Luther Adams. And I've chosen his words for our opening words. A church that does not concern itself with the struggle in history for human dignity and justice, a church that does not show concern for the shape of things to come, a church that does not attempt to interpret signs of the times, is not a prophetic church. We have long held to the idea of the priesthood of all believers, the idea that all believers have direct access to the ultimate resources of the religious life, and that every believer has the responsibility of achieving an explicit faith for free persons. We need also a firm belief in the prophethood of all believers. The prophetic liberal church is not a church in which the prophetic function is assigned merely to the few. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which persons think and work together to interpret the signs of the times in the light of their faith, to make explicit through discussion the thinking that the times demand. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which all members share the common responsibility to attempt to foresee the consequences of human behavior, with the intention of making history in place of merely being pushed around by it. Only through the prophethood of all believers can we together foresee doom and mend our common ways. Let there be light. Let it shine in dark places, in moments of pain, in times of grief, in the darkness of hatred, violence, oppression, where there is discouragement and pain. Wherever darkness is to be put to flight, let there be light. Please join me in the covenant of our church. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is a sacrament, and service is prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all with each other and with our God. I'm not sure what inspired me to focus on today's topic about fascism. It may have been spending too much time in the dystopian world of Gilead, watching The Handmaid's Tale, or reading the news from my birth country just to cheer me up. Or it could be that fascism, by any other name, is finding new life around the world. We should not be oblivious. When I was growing up, there were 4 larger-than-life villains in the immediate post-World War II era: Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Francisco Franco, and Joseph Stalin. The first 3 self-identified as fascists, and a number of scholars argue Stalin had more in common with them than with Karl Marx. As the atrocities of World War II became widely known through the Nuremberg trials, it was not uncommon for Americans to wonder how anyone could have been swept up into fascism. Not aware of their own history in regard to fascism, their self-righteous condemnation of the moral failure of the German and Italian people was prevalent. It certainly couldn't happen here in America, they thought. Apparently, a one-definition-fits-all understanding of fascism does not exist in academia. So I found it more useful to look at characteristics common to fascist regimes. Political science, Dr. Lawrence Britt identifies 14 of them in his essay entitled, "Fascism, Anyone?" 1. Fascist regimes make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. 2, because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. 3, the people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe: racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, migrants, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, and probably more than a few Unitarians. Even when there are widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers and military service are glamorized. 5, the governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high, as is homophobia, and anti-gay legislation and national policy. Sometimes the media are directly controlled by the government, but in other cases, the media are indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media, people, and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. 7, fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. 8, governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. We will explore this characteristic more closely in a few minutes. 9, the industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation often are the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business-government relationship and power elite. 10, because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government, labor unions are either eliminated entirely or severely suppressed. 11, fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It's not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts is openly attacked, and governments often refuse to fund the arts. 12, under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forgo civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There is often a national police force with virtually unlimited power in fascist nations. Fascist regimes almost always are governed by groups of friends and associates who appoint each other to government positions and use governmental power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It is not uncommon in fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. And last, sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times, elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassination of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate or control elections. We'll take a moment and pause to reflect on Make America Great Again MAGA hats, Muslim bans, Fox News, undermining LGBTQ rights, the wall, children in cages, the Space Force, ICE, draconian laws restricting abortion, union busting, encouraging foreign countries to interfere in elections, removing Democrats from electoral rolls, assassinations of foreign leaders, mainstreaming racism and misogyny as acceptable, turning a blind eye to or even advocating violence, more fake news, denying scientific evidence, enemy lists, gross corruption for personal financial gain, tax rates for corporations at the expense of the poor, breaking laws with no accountability, and the Christian far right proclaiming Trump as the second coming of Christ. And that is just the beginning of the list of how the U.S. has slid into fascism. It didn't just happen in the last 30 years. It has its roots in colonial times. But now all 14 characteristics are overwhelmingly in evidence. Many of us knew it would be a time of darkness under a Trump administration. But with the firewall of the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate, one wonders if even the balm of Gilead can heal the contagion of fascism now raging in the U.S. I'm honestly terrified. We can't, though, sit back and assume this is America's problem. Fascism is a virus that is not easily quarantined. Historically, even New Zealand has had outbreaks, but fortunately, to date, it has never gained a strong foothold. Although the fascist New Zealand Legion had a membership of 20,000 in the 30s. Remember, we were a much smaller population. The 1980s saw a number of fascist political groups form, but none have flourished. Like the US, we have an election this year. It will be interesting to observe if any of the 14 characteristics rear their head. It will be important for us to pay attention. This is particularly true for Unitarians. For religion and fascism have been natural allies, and our 7 principles make us the antidote to this poison. But not if we don't speak up. Davison Lohr, who in 2005, well before Trump, was the minister of the UU Church of Austin, Texas. He was interviewed in the UU World after delivering a widely read sermon on living under fascism. Dr. Lohr, a fellow in the Jesus Seminar, holds a doctoral degree in theology, philosophy of religion, and the philosophy of science from the University of Chicago. He is clearly not a fan of organized religion and clerical hierarchies. When asked if religion was bad for democracy, this was his answer. Literalistic religion is always bad for democracy and is, in fact, one of its mortal enemies. There's a Buddhist metaphor, he goes on to say, that says all religions, gods, saviors, sages, and teachings are so many fingers pointing to the moon. The object, of course, is to see where they're pointing, not to worship the finger. While democracy demands civil behavior and encourages all citizens to grow into their best selves, it also recognizes that there are many roads, many fingers, and makes sure you are free to find the path toward our common behavioral goals that fits you. That's part of the moral reasoning behind the separation of church and state. But when you are stuck in that deadening literalism, you aren't looking for the light, you're worshiping the finger. Then other paths threaten the primacy of your own path and must not be allowed. So literal religions are natural allies of authoritarian and repressive governments, but are never happy residents in a democracy where people are free to shrug off literalist notions of salvation. Later in the interview is asked, under the existing orthodoxy, is God a fascist? Is any concept of God consistent with critical thought and humanism? His answer is, when God is a finger, he'll be looking for a trigger to pull. It's in the real world, God doesn't exist as a being, a critter with a neocortex, kneecaps, and eyeballs. The word God is a symbol that stands for those ideals and allegiances that we happen to think are most demanding of respect and obedience. Once again, we're looking for the moon, for enlightenment, illumination. Looking for the moon empowers the seekers, but not the priests or the politicians. In Christianity, this is the difference between the Gospel of John in the New Testament and the Gospel of Thomas, which was excluded from the New Testament precisely because it empowers everyone rather than empowering only the leaders, whether priest, church, politician, or state. God talk isn't the description of a critter. It's an idiom of expression used to address issues we believe very important. But since there is no fellow called God that exists except as an imaginative creation, that means that when preachers speak as though there is such a fellow and claim to be speaking for this fellow, then they have turned the symbol God into a hand puppet to do their bidding, not yours. Pretending to speak for this fellow empowers the churches and keeps the ministers in their jobs, says the guy who wants to retire someday. When asked if fascism is a kind of political fundamentalism, he explains, I think it's useful to see fascism as political fundamentalism and fundamentalism as religious fascism. They have nearly identical social and political agendas. They both want men on top in every way, women defined by their biology and by men, literal rather than liberal understanding of religion, and obedience rather than empowerment. Both also operate on a foundation of fear rather than trust. As I reflect on this existential threat, this clear and present danger, I have come to the conclusion we can't just observe fascism's insidious inroads into our political and economic processes. We need to eliminate the conditions that demagogues use to build a constituency. You see, fascists have no compunction to tell the truth. They look at the injustices and hardships that grind us down and then lie. They tell us who is to blame for our problems and then promise to protect us from them and make all things right. This means we have to take seriously the conditions that make fascism attractive to those disadvantaged by the present system, be it high youth unemployment amongst those on the margins, debilitating student debt, stagnant wages, inability to find affordable and decent housing, ignoring the consequences of climate change, corrupt election financing, hamstringing labor unions, gender wage inequality, misusing social media to deceive and fuel hate are just some of the ways the soil is made fertile for fascism. We must be a faith movement that talks about morality, responsibility, and ethics, and walks our talk. Unitarians must be the finger that points to them, not religion. We must seek to serve the greater good of the greatest number, leaving the world a little better than we found it. Unfortunately, this is not a once and for all task. The world must be civilized again and again and again with each new generation. That's reason enough for our existence. Amen. For our meditation, I'd like to read a poem entitled Attic by Jill Sobuli. Would you have hidden me in your attic? That's the question I'd like to know. Would you have climbed up to serve me dinner? Well, I hope so. When the jackbooted men wore those great uniforms, would you have wanted the blackest? Would you have hidden me in your attic? If, let's say, in some cafe we saw the tanks roll by, would you take my hand and lead me across the borderline? Would you have hidden me in your attic? If the neighbors accused me of casting spells and bowing down to the gods in hell, you would leave me there alone? Or would you cast the very first stone? You'd be there to ease my pain or pack me on that awful train. Would you have hidden me in your attic? That's the question I'll never know. would you have climbed up to serve me dinner? Well, I hope so.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire. These we carry in our hearts till we are together again.
Closing words. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.